Hi, everybody. I'm here with Carolyn Gage, who's here for a return visit. As our viewers know, perhaps, she is a lesbian feminist playwright, a Renaissance woman. She's written many other things, has a blog, has written essays, has written short stories. Um, but we're here to celebrate the arrival of her new collection, Big Plays. I can't, yes, I mean, I loved each play, and we're here to talk about them. Um, First, if I welcome Carolyn.
I'm delighted to be back here. I've really enjoyed the meeting you in the previous interview. This is wonderful.
Well, thank you for sharing your work with us. And let me read a little summary of this volume that I recommend that you can um, purchase if you go to Carolyn Gage Big Plays on the internet. Is that right?
Yeah, if you just Google my name and Big Plays, you will run across it. It's in Amazon, it's in Barnes and Noble. You can get it off my website, or you can go to lulu.com and type in Big Plays Carolyn Gage and get to it.
Let's read the summary. One reason you should get it: huge casts, gigantic themes, multiple subplots, more scenes than a Shakespeare play, two intermissions, epic sweeps of history, breathtaking relevance with heart stopping suspense and momentum. In other words, what would have been known in previous eras as plays by one of the world's most public and prolific and feminist and lesbian playwrights. So this is, I spent all morning, I spent several days earlier this week going through this volume, and I can't recommend it enough. It's very, very exciting.
Thank
Um,
you.
there are three plays in McClintock's Corn, which is about Barbara McClintock, the historical figure, Nobel Prize winner. Um, and it also sheds a lot of light on autism. And I'd like to talk about that a little later. The second play is Stigmata, which explores the lesbian contradictions that we can be both victims and victimizers. And this was really riveting. I was raised Catholic, so a lot of it was
Mm.
familiar. I hate to say it, even though it takes place in the 17th century. And the third play is The Spindle, which is a children's fairy tale for adults, and it explores the banality and horror of incest. So that's a encapsulation. Let me ask you about the two historical plays. How did you have to choose these two figures to write about? Uh, McClintock and Benedetta Carlini, the 17th century nun.
Well, I read a lot, and every now and then it's like I'll read something and I feel a little hand tap my shoulder and say, that, write about that. I kind of feel that my plays come to me. And then I was 7 years writing Stigmata. That was a big play, and I knew it. That was enormous. And the amount of research, I think I've got several banker boxes of notes about, I had to look at early modern Italy, witch hunts, convent life, whole life of Galileo, who was kind of in the same time period. I mean, just massive amounts of, and the Inquisition. Um, but yeah, that was one that tapped me on the shoulder. And McClintock's Corn was 30 years gestating. I had read Reverence for Life, or it was a biography by, I think, Evelyn Fox. Don't quote me, but I knew I have to write about her. And it took me 30 years. And it's interesting because after I wrote it, which was in the pandemic year, the first year of the pandemic, 2 years ago, I realized I had to be old to write this. It spans, her life from late 20s until she was in her 80s and won the Nobel Prize. And, she'd crossed my radar in my late 30s. And I realized there's no way I could have written this. I am old now. And I can deal with that sweep because I lived it. So that was, that was wonderful. Yeah. And then, well, the autism is a piece of that also, but you were going to talk about that. So,
Well, you just discovered you were diagnosed with autism yourself in the recent past.
I was. I wrote the play about McClintock, and then after that, I discovered she is considered autistic now, and that's pretty obvious if you look at her life. And then it began to dawn on me, and so am I. I mean, it just was very interesting that writing that play, for some reason, just broke open my denial about that, and now I am stunned. I mean, I was tiptoeing, buzzing, humming, spinning. Just the behaviors as a very small child, but then of course the adult choices, the fanatic hyper focus on the lesbian plays and the writing of them, and the insane sacrifices I've made to do that. Autistic as hell. I mean, just like, how did I miss that?
And if you read the play, it really is clarifying in terms of the level of concentration that McClintock needed with her corn and how focused it was, and how I know it's not necessarily how productive it was and how accomplished she became. She was a Nobel Prize winner. So this focus really paid off in terms of outside world
But
reward.
but notice that was not the reward. The work was the reward in itself. She did at a certain part, her work was very not what the culture was about. The culture was about the atom bomb and the discovery of the structure of DNA. And we've cracked the code from life. Everything's downhill from here. And she kept saying, no, no, you're missing it. Environment influences the DNA. And they're just like, no, we are little gods. We are little gods. And that's just not true. And she just sat it out for another 30 years. They gave her the Nobel Prize for work she'd done in the 50s when she was universally trashed. And I think that's autistic. She didn't care, and she stopped publishing. She stopped talking about her work. It's like, why bother? Why bother? They don't understand me. But that didn't put a dent in her agenda, her steady work, the getting up, the working 7 days a week, because that was her area of special interest. And I absolutely relate to that. I began my career when there were like 3 lesbian theater companies in the country. I don't know that there are any now. And I write on, subjects that are difficult. I write heavily censored archetype, the lesbian butch, especially these days. I write the survivor of child sexual abuse. It has never fazed me. I had a New York agent. She's like, you've got to write more men in. You've got to de-lesbian. If these were straight women, I could market them. None of that fazed me. It was like, I just felt like I have to write what I write. They come to me. I write I'm given assignments and I write them. That I think is autistic. I look at that and I look at McClintock's work. It's like, I know what she's doing. And it's incomprehensible to other people who want a family, a home, a decent income. How can you write over 100 plays knowing that most of them will never be seen in your lifetime? And then if they are, they'll be so controversial, they'll make your life incredibly difficult. Autism, easy answer.
One of my favorite lines in the play, and this is what I was trying to articulate earlier, is that it's not really about outside rewards. And the McClintock character in the play says the idea is not to win, but to prevail.
Yes.
And I think that's really key.
Yes.
I certainly learned a lot from that play, so thank you for writing it. Okay, let's go to the Catholic Church in the 17th century.
Well, plague times. Plague times. Notice plague times, and we're in plague times now. Yeah.
That's right. And the ending is kind of apocalyptic. I don't know if I want to spoil it, but the plague is.
No, don't spoil the ending. But yes, absolutely. And we are in a time of hysterical beliefs in silver bullets that are demonstrably not silver bullets. Very much like what people did in the plague time, believing in something, even if it doesn't work, assuages the anxiety, and then a fanatic embrace of that is a part of that. It's really, yeah, that was interesting. I mean, I wrote this before we were in plague times, like it was something long ago and far away, but apparently not.
I know, and all the machinations of the ins and outs of the Catholic Church are
Oh, God.
it's really. um, the third play is The Spindle, and I was really, I think it's really an important play. You say it's your most autobiographical play. Can you talk
Yeah,
a little?
this is a radical retelling of Sleeping Beauty. That's the spindle. Yeah, but it's the phallus.
Yeah,
The pricking of the finger when you turn 16, traumatic teenage encounter with the phallocracy, if you will, and then she just goes to sleep. She dissociates. She becomes amnesiac. That's this falling asleep. There are many young women that fall asleep, not literally, but in terms of the dissociation, amnesia, identifying themselves with the perpetrator, all of those things. I actually feel like that fairy tale has always been a reference to the interference of girls coming of age and the falling asleep.
well,
Yeah.
and the tale is that if Beauty, one of the heroines, is pricked by the spindle, she'll fall asleep for 100 years, but then that's redefined as for a long time, and falling asleep becomes more metaphorical.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I mean, the whole use of scar tissue and this symbol of having how many people have been pricked in this. It's almost like a stigmata thing from the other play. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's true. Spindle scars, and those of us that are in late stage recovery from child sexual abuse, I think we are adept at identifying those spindle scars. I hang out with unrecovered survivors, and I I can, maybe it's a little grandiose, but I feel like there's a lot of markers, and that, if you're on the far side of recovery, I think it's kind of like being in recovery from alcoholism or addiction. You can probably walk into a room and pretty quickly pick up who's active in an addiction. There's just subtle markers and stuff that a lot of people in the culture don't pick up on. But in this, that's the metaphor. And the little butch heroine, Doko, who's like 13 years old, she begins to perceive that everyone has spindle scars in the whole kingdom, all the women. And that's why she's not able to get anywhere. She's trying to talk about this frightening situation with the spindle and the curse, and the women are not responding appropriately. And suddenly the horror is like, they reveal their hand, their palm, and she's like, oh my God, they've all been pricked. None
mhm.
of them can think clearly. They were all asleep. They were all dissociated. They were all perpetrator identified. And I kind of feel like, yeah, I mean, survivors, we certainly have that experience a lot, you know.
And one of a great part of the play that I personally enjoyed was um, when you put in that they're going to Doko and uh, Andrea, the godmother who's Butch, they have a Butch to Butch conversation.
Yeah.
Also, they sit there and say, "Yeah," 4 times, and then it comes up a few. That's their conversation, and I just loved it because I personally am a lesbian, and I wonder if um, it's a lesbian audience would really appreciate this.
I'm thinking, oh, it's a little bit of a stereotype, but Doko has had her first rejection, crushing rejection by a heterosexual girl who has been flirting with her. It was not, and is crushed, confused. And here's the butch fairy godmother who's like, realizes I got to talk to her about this. And she doesn't really have the skills, and Doko doesn't either. And they're just doing this little butch bonding thing that I'm trying to infuse a little humor into it. But yes,
Great, I love
I
it.
think my plays are very, there's a lot of things that lesbian audiences get from my plays that a straight audience wouldn't necessarily understand that they're in the presence of lesbian archetypes because they're so heavily censored. Um, and the butch on butch, mentorship, you're never allowed to even see one butch, much less two, much less an older one and a younger one. There's a lot of scenarios that are missing from the canon, that my plays are trying to write back in.
And the three godmothers are all lesbians.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
Doko's been raised by these three godmothers who, some of them have the scars too, right?
Bethenny, yeah. One of them is confused, as many family members are, and they feel the best way to protect the family is to kill the memories, to
Mhm.
split off. That will not serve us well. Your father's a wonderful person or whatever. Just that false, it was misguided loyalties, and we see her. She's a good-hearted woman, and is just doing knee-jerk, keep the secret stuff. And we see her come to consciousness about that and is horrified by her complicity and just really devastated that she was protecting the perpetrator and sacrificing the child and didn't even see it. Yeah, that kind of remorse. Um, I have worked with mothers where incest happened, and there's a tremendous sense of guilt. And there's very few recovery programs for those mothers. There's just so much shame, so much guilt. So, and again, that's a difficult archetype, and I wanted to put her in my fairy tale. And of course, there is redemption and compassion and forgiveness for her.
Well, to change the tone, there was a little revenge scene or a scene of violence against one of the perpetrators in the play. I don't want to give too much away, but the guy says, "You can't kill me, I'm your father." And Doko kills him.
Yeah, she's like, yes, I can. And that's my own journey. That's like probably the most important scene in the play. That's why I wrote it. That's what I was trying to get to. I think she says, just because this was the one that was so important to me, the line, just because you're my father doesn't mean I have to be your daughter. And that frees her up to
Mhm.
treat him. She treats him as an enemy, threatening her life and the lives of ones she loves, and that warrants killing him. Um, but yeah, that's a real revelation. That those are words. You don't act like a father. You know what? I have no obligation, none, along familial lines.
And I
You,
personally found that scene very empowering. I loved it. It was empowering, and
yes, I love Tony Cade Bambara taught me, that, it's we write for revolution, and that's certainly, and I like that I used the conventions. It is a children's theater play. It's got the four primary colors, the fairy godmothers, the magic, the chandelier swinging, the sword fights, and it's all about child sexual abuse and a culture where incest is the central paradigm of patriarchy. I can't remember what famous feminist said that, but that is true, and it isn't an isolated incident. And I felt like setting it as a children's theater with the sparkle and the bibbity bobbity boo, the horror of, actually this is a common experience for a majority of little girls. This isn't a
yeah.
bridge too far. I'm not overreaching here. You really want a fairy tale about the lives of children? Here it is. Um,
In your intro, you say 30 to 40% of young girls experience incest. That's a huge number.
well, and in that, it's like father figures, the dentist or the priest or whatever, or an uncle, or, it's not always the biological father, but it's kind of a father figure, authority figure. Yeah, and the percentage is 1 out of 3. It really, I always remember that they say if you want to terrorize a whole population, or control a whole population, colonize a population, terrorize 15%. That's enough to achieve it. And I'm like, well, we've got 33 1/3% for girls and women. So we are like double colonized. That's like overkill. If you only need to terrorize 15%, we got double that and then some. And the whole culture, I think, of women, femininity, all that stuff, myths about motherhood. I mean, I feel like what we're looking at is a colonized culture, and the roots of that are this terrorization. If we weren't raped in childhood, we certainly are surrounded by friends and family members who were, and all the lessons that come from that.
The other thing I liked about the play was the ending. I mean, you subverted the conventional expectation that the prince figure was going to kiss Sleeping Beauty, and everything was going to end happily ever after. I thought that was really cool.
Well, the traditional fairy tale is again, I think it always was about child sexual abuse. It's so phallic and graphic, and the falling asleep and the pricking. But the answer is find the one good man. That'll fix it. And oh my God, battered women's shelters are packed with women who thought they found the one good man. We know that's not the solution now. It's the self-love and the women who can model the self-love and teach us to love ourselves. Yeah, I think that when Angelina Jolie did the film Maleficent, I think they had the prince kiss and nothing much came of it. They made a point like that too. I think it was the love of a mother or something, the self-love. I mean, we've evolved. We know waiting for the prince is not a good, no, it's not good strategy. Um, yeah, but I think what was upsetting for some lesbian audience members is they wanted to see the princess get back together with this childhood friend, Doko, and the princess is too far gone with privilege.
And that's what's so good about the play. I mean, to turn to metafiction at that point, I thought it was brilliant, really.
Yeah, the happy ending. It has a happy ending, but it
Right.
is not going to be romance. And I want to say that it is true. It's just like in recovery, there are some people not capable of it. And beauty does not have the structures and she's inundated with privilege. She's not going to make it. She's got too much incentive to be complicit in her own abuse, and she's surrounded by people that are supporting that. And her little friend is a working class kitchen helper
I know.
and a child and not part of her blood family. And I just want to say that's real. That's real. She's never going to wake up. And the sad thing is when you love women like that, you have to turn and walk away. You have to realize I am going to have to become part of this or else leave to save myself. And Doko, with the help of her godmothers, has a wonderful resolution. But the romance junkies are like,
I too was hoping for that, the convention.
but I can't work miracles. I wrote this character. I'm like, you know what? She's going. You know what? She's not coming with us.
I know that's so much more real.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
part of the
It's
power.
cautionary, it's like, those girls, those straight girls, sometimes you just got to turn and just kind of wrap them in a little warm blanket and say, I gotta turn this over now, and I'm leaving. Good luck. Good luck and good night. Yeah.
So tell me, what's your next project? What are you working on now?
I'm working on a play called St. Francis and the Fallen Angels, and that sounds kind of evangelical or something, but keep in mind the line, there are no fallen angels, there's only women who've been pushed. And this is about Frances Perkins, the Secretary of State, Secretary of Labor throughout the whole Roosevelt 4 terms. And it's a particular night, and she's in a crisis, and she's being sandbagged and set up by the president to fail. And the issue on the table is Social Security, which is literally the lives of millions and millions of people. And what people don't know about her is once a month, all those 12 years, she would leave Washington and her male-only environment and go up to a convent in Baltimore, an Anglican convent, for 3 days of peace and quiet. So that's where I've set it. And she's on the verge of quitting. The deck is stacked, the pressure, realizing she's been set up, And also, she had a partner who was a woman, a roommate, who had just died unexpectedly. And there's no acknowledgement of this because it was a closeted relationship. But she's lost her housing, she's lost the love of her life, she's lost this tremendous Washington wife who made, stuff happens in Washington at the dinner parties as a single woman. But that couple, you bring Mary, Mary and I are going to have, whatever. Mary's gone. And so she's grieving, but not allowed to grieve. And she's kind of on the clock with this impossible job she has to do. And it's Christmas. It's Christmas Eve. And so all these, it's a very intense little one-act play. And it's about quitting. It's about, I can't do this anymore. And of course, that's a crisis of faith also. God has begun to look a lot like FDR. Like, I expect you to do this, but I'm not going to give you any of the shit you need to do it. And I think all of us, especially dykes, have come to a point where it's like, you know what? That's not fair. I feel that way often, writing lesbian plays, like building the ark in the middle of the desert. There's no rain in sight. There's no lesbian. There's nobody producing work like I'm doing. And the academics won't touch it with a 10-foot pole. And it's like, I can't do this anymore. And then there's, you must. And then it's, I can't. And that is, I'm writing as usual, right on my own red hot issues. And I'm up against it right now when it's seeing queer culture is incredibly hostile to lesbian culture. And that's breaking my heart and my back. And I'm kind of like with Frances in that convent. And Frances, 20 years prior to where my play happens, she stood on the sidewalk outside the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire.
Oh, wow.
That is what forged her. That's where she got this spine of steel. I think if you stand there and you watch these 147, mostly girls and young women, jump out the window, most of them on fire. They didn't jump until they absolutely had to. I think you either just come away broken, or you pick up a good alcohol habit so you don't have to think about it, or you become Frances Perkins, who's responsible for the 40-hour work week, the child labor laws, social securities, unemployment insurance, oh my God, she was, but again, mission driven. And often when you're mission driven, the breakdown is horrendous. It's just like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore.
Carol, keep going, because we read big plays, everybody, and we want to hear more from you. Come back anytime, because your work is so exciting and interesting.
Thank you. And I also want to tell people, email me, Carolyn@CarolynGage.com. I have a reading on February 6th of a play called Star Pattern that I absolutely love. It's a very short play. It's about the 1966 Texas, Austin, the first mass shooting as we know them. Of course, we've been shooting people, indigenous people, but it's the first contemporary mass shooting. And the first victim lay on the mall, wounded. Nobody would rescue her because he was still shooting. This 23-year-old lesbian, runs out, huge risk, lies down next to her, and keeps her conscious and alive until she's able to be rescued. She was bleeding out. She would not have survived without that. This is a play about Rita Star Pattern, that lesbian who did that, a staggering act of courage and solidarity with a woman she didn't know who was 8 months pregnant. It's a really important play about establishing matriarchal spaces in the belly of the inferno of patriarchal violence. And these women did something so radical. All right, I'm going to shut up now.
Well, go on the website.
But you email me and I'll send you the registration number. It's a Zoom reading, and then later I'm going to put it up on YouTube. But come and join us live on February 6th, 4 o'clock Eastern Time, because there's going to be a question and answer and a talk back. And I love this play. I love this play.
Carolyn, thank you.
Thank you.